there's still shock in Switzerland after the 39% tariff took effect today, and the government there says they're going to fight to have that changed. But Switzerland isn't the only country reacting to the dramatic levies being imposed.
Making small countries like us pay, I find that, well, I won't say unfair. It's a bit stupid, but it's shocking, worrying.
This makes it impossible to look to a future with a peace of mind. Personally, I have no confidence in stability, in a bright future, because Trump is unpredictable.
We were making money. The revenues were on course with what we had projected. All right. As soon as the tariffs started to really take place, that disappeared. So now we are at a shortfall.
And so to the Crossmeans Business tariff basket. Now, the new tariffs on a lot of the goods won't be immediate, because if it was loaded onto a ship before yesterday and it arrives before October, then it'll face the old tariff rate. But we have been keeping a track on certain items since Liberation Day in April. The QMB. Let's start with olive oil. In early April, it cost $16.89. The price is now $17.59, almost a full dollar higher today. Coffee has gone from $8 to $8.89. Now, you think of it as that way, but that's quite a hefty rise in terms of price. That's a 10% rise in price. So if you drink that, and bearing in mind this doesn't allow for coffee from, say, Brazil, where they grow an awful lot of coffee in Brazil, as the song says. This is Colombia, but there we go, which has, I think, a 15% tariff rate. But you get the idea. When that starts, it'll really add up. Some items have actually fallen. For example, cheese. Where's the cheese? The cheese has gone from $6.29 to $6.19. Now, overall, we haven't also allowed for apparel, which is one of the larger items. Overall, our groceries cost us $59, slightly less than in April. The basket of electronics runs you $1,100. That's up 40 from our April calculation. Clothing is 42, pretty much the same, and the other essentials is around just bits and bobs. Andrew Hollenhorst is the chief US economist at Citi. Now, Andrew, I'm going to tell you what you already know, which is that our tariff basket hasn't gone up that much, largely because, A, a lot of the tariffs are being eaten by the manufacturers, producers, or importers, and B, they were structured so they wouldn't have fully taken effect. But you, I think, believe, like others, it's just a question of time.
I think that's right, Richard. There is a question of time here. How long is it going to take before we see some of these price increases come through into certain goods? And we know that some businesses would have had inventories that they hadn't paid tariffs on. So all of this can take months before it comes through in the data. The important thing, though, is does this just stay focused on a goods-based inflation, which would be my view, and not spread more broadly? That's what you really start to worry about from an economy-wide perspective is this a real new inflationary shock broadly, or is this kind of a one-time rise in certain goods prices?
What's your feeling on that?
I think what we're going to see in this scenario is more of a one-time price shock. And the reason why is because of the other things that are going on in the economy. If you look at consumer spending, it's slowing down. If you look at the housing sector, we actually have a pretty weak housing sector right now with house prices that have been falling. So the other sectors of the economy, the domestic economy is a disinflationary economy. Yes, you'll probably see some price rises in certain goods, but I don't think this is the type of economy where demand is really strong and firms are going to be able to push up prices and continue to push them up.
So is the president, and essentially right, James Grierson, who points out, James Grierson in his article says that basically the worst cases of prognosis are not going to happen. The money is going to roll in, which will help negate, if not fully, at least mitigate the deficit, and therefore the naysayers are wrong.
Well, if you go back and think about the worst case scenarios, it does look like we've avoided some of those. Now, partly that's because some of these tariff rates have come down. If you remember, not that long ago, we were concerned about 150% tariffs with respect to China. This would have really snarled supply chains and greatly increased the cost of certain inputs and made some inputs just unaffordable as producers are trying to create their products. So those were the scenarios where you could have seen really big spikes in prices and really negative implications for growth. I think that has largely been avoided. And the other thing that's been avoided so far is a lot of retaliation. That was the other concern, that would we see other countries raising tariffs against the US? So far, we haven't seen a lot of that either.
So can we say that the president's policy is succeeding?
I think what we can say so far is that we have an economy that was a strong economy and that has been resilient. We need to watch to see if these price increases are going to come through or not in terms of the goods prices. But in terms of, is this tariff regime going to be something that pushes the economy into a recession or causes persistent higher inflation? It really looks like that's not the case so far.
And on the bigger, wider issue, which we can't really know for maybe 20 years, a lot of the supply chains today were built around optimization of efficiency. Therefore, if we now have production in less efficient places to avoid collateral issues like tariffs, then eventually does the US economy perform at a less productive? I mean, it may look like a headline, but actually you're making things that really shouldn't be made here, but they're being made here so that companies don't get clobbered for other. You get where I'm going with that.
Yeah, it's still a very big question. How much is production really going to reallocate it? You mentioned 20 years. That's probably the kind of time scale we should be thinking about for really big shifts in terms of where production is happening. Now, we know some of that will happen in the nearer term, and it could be that the cost of producing some goods is higher. Producing goods with U.S. labor is going to be higher than producing goods with foreign labor. But that's a policy decision, right? That's something that we should think about as a society, as a country. Do we want to pay a little bit more for shoes, for instance, and have those shoes produced in the U.S., or pay less and have them produced abroad? That's what politicians are figuring out. I'm just trying to do the economics here.
Okay, Andrew, though, when you were learning your economics, and did you ever think you would see a U.S. trade regime that was fully based on tariffs again?
Yeah, this is really a big change from where we were over the last 20 years, over the last 30 years, as you had tariff rates that were coming down globally. You had just a completely different regime. So when I was a graduate student, when I was teaching graduate students, did I think this was going to happen? No, this was not something that I expected. And that's one of the great things about this job, is we're always analyzing new and surprising situations.
And the moment you have your analysis, I look forward to you being back on Quest Business to give it to us. Thank you, Andrew. Always good to see you, sir. Very grateful.
You.